Welcome back. I'm Connie Sokol, your host, and I am delighted today to have our very special guest. And you are going to love this woman. She's the type that you wish you can invite over and want to invite over for a cup of hot cocoa and a little bit of Danish butter cookie and just sit and talk about your life. That's the kind of woman that's here today. It's Brooke Romney, and we are so happy to have you. Hi, Brooke.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Just delighted. You probably know her from her beautiful Instagram community, which is so fun. I love reading her posts. And from her new book, I Like Me Anyway, that came out last October. Or you may have seen her at Time Out for Women. She speaks there too. But whatever she's doing, she is sharing, loving, connecting, and helping women to embrace who they are, imperfections and all, and keep moving forward with joy and purpose. So we are going to talk about all those beautiful things today. To add on to that little bit of bio, she's been writing articles and publications in places like the Washington Post and Deseret News, Scary Mommy, and a host of other publications that have been widely read. So if you want to check out more of what she's got, check those out definitely, because her content is so good. It's the kind that I was reading her book and I kept highlighting and highlighting and highlighting. And I'm like, okay, we can't go through the entire book in this podcast, but we're going to hit some of the highlights. So let's jump right in. I love what you share a lot about how women see themselves versus how God sees them. So can you talk with us, especially right now? There's a lot going on in the background in our country, our communities, and then you add on to the COVID, the pandemic, and then you add on to that in the last, I would say 10, 20, 30 years, that it keeps ramping up what women are supposed to do and do well and do perfectly and Pinterestly. And I think this just is kind of hit this peak for women of, I just can't do that anymore, but they kind of don't know where they fit from there. Like, I don't want to run this race, but I don't know what that looks like other than that. So with that kind of background, how do we navigate trying to see how God sees us and see who we truly are, our majestic selves versus what we maybe see when we look in the mirror? How do we kind of navigate that?
Well, you bring up so many good points. And I think a lot of it started, with Pinterest. And I told a little story in my book about, I had my first baby before the internet, basically. And I thought I was so awesome. I had no one to compare myself to. We lived in a teeny tiny basement condo in Washington, D.C. I had no mom friends. I was super lonely, but I really thought that I was this awesome mom, this fabulous designer, this great homemade cook. And then we moved to a new place. And it was kind of one of those communities where everyone was the same age and everyone had the same kids. And I would go over to people's houses, and their houses actually were like well decorated, and they had food storage, and they were cooking homemade bread. And I just remember thinking, it's so funny. Nothing changed about me, but because I started comparing myself to other people, I just felt worthless. I just felt like, oh, never mind. I'm not good at this, and I'm not good at that. And I'm actually horrible at this. Or I'll never measure up. And I kind of started to go inside myself because I think when we're in that spot, a lot of us, we retreat because we just don't want people to know how not amazing we are. And sometimes we're just not like willing to let ourselves, we don't even want to be confronted with it because we just don't feel great. And so I moped for a little bit and I, pouted. And then one day, basically the Spirit said to me, knock it off. And it was one of those times where it just taught me that there were so many gifts that I had that I could use. And maybe they weren't the type that were on display. But I'm a great talker and I'm a good friend and I had learned to be pretty brave about gathering women. And so I was able to reach out, and I created play groups and park days. And I think God really helped me to see that every talent is a gift and is necessary. And if we figure out what those are for us, if we start understanding a little bit of our purpose or a little bit of who God wants us to be, and I think sometimes that's a lot of pressure. Oh my gosh, what's my purpose? Who does God want me to be? That sounds so big, but really we can do it in really small ways. In who does God need me to be today? Or what talent do I have that I'd like to work on today? Or is there someone in my life who could teach me a little bit more about this? Because I think it sounds interesting. And it doesn't, I think we make it so big sometimes that that's just like one more overwhelming thing. Like all these women have purpose and I don't, but it's just small. It's so small. It's just today. It's just this afternoon. Who does he need me to be to my kids? What does he want me to learn? How can I improve just a little tiny bit?
Love. And I love that point that you make, just those little bits. Those little bits. I love that it doesn't have to be this global changing of the world purpose, but it can just be a more purposeful, I'm just going to look at my kids' eyeballs and behold them, whatever, just a
Yeah.
small thing. And that's part of our purpose. And I love that point that you make. And I love the point that you make that not all the talents you have were on display. I know you talk about learning from these women. You opened up, and instead of shrinking, which I think is one of the big problems with comparison traps, is that we end up shrinking automatically. I remember feeling like I had gained 10 pounds and I didn't want to go to homemaking, because I didn't want everyone to say I gained 10 pounds. Like, anyone cares, and everyone
Right.
noticed. Like, no.
No
So they're
one
all worried about
noticed.
themselves, right? It's so ridiculous. And I remember this phrase coming of do it anyway. Do it anyway. Well, I don't have that. And I didn't make the perfect dessert for the thing, and do it anyway for the PTA. Well, do it anyway. So I
Right.
love that. I love that you're talking about taking these small steps. We talk about taking the next right step. So
Right.
what can women do if they're feeling like I loved when you moved into that new area, you switched gears. You
Yeah.
said, I'm gonna have them teach me how they make their cinnamon rolls and how they do that. And then you ended up having all these skills when you moved from that neighborhood, and you were
Yeah.
able to have all these friendships and things like that. When someone that's listening out there is like, yeah, but like, what would be a simple step that you would recommend? And what would be a way that they could sort of get out of their own way, right? Because we want to take a step, but then we want to go and we just kind of binge watch Netflix and say, we'll do it tomorrow. So what would be any tips for being able to really make that happen, to stop comparing, to take the next step?
Well, I would suggest maybe writing down. Writing works for me. If you're more into meditating or something, you can try that. But writing down maybe 4 things that you are really good at or that you are really interested in. And then what I would do is, for the things that you're good at, I would ask myself, how can I share those things? How could I share that? If you are great at cooking, could you make dinner for someone? Or could you teach your daughter how to make dinner? Or if you are good at writing, could you help, like your elementary school class? Or maybe could you write, even if it doesn't get published, could you write an op-ed to the newspaper about something you care about? So those are a couple of things that you could do. And then when you talk about things that you want to learn more about, write down those and then think of people that you know that are good at them. One of my favorite friendships that I have right now is with my neighbor, because she's great at gardening and flowers. And I was interested in that. And I could have gone on the internet and I could have done my research, or I could have maybe hired someone to plant my flowers. But instead, I chose to ask my neighbor. And it was such a great, it opened the door to friendship for the two of us to have something in common. And now there's much more in common than flowers. But realizing that every time you're interested in someone or you want to learn more and you involve someone in that process, you're going to build a relationship, not just a talent.
Oh, love that. And I love, in such a day and age, especially with COVID, it is a little bit more difficult sometimes to be able to reach out, even more so than before. But
For
you're
sure.
exactly right. We can Zoom it. We can talk across the neighbor fence. We can say, hey, how did you get those zucchinis like that? What the heck? I know I did
Totally.
a garden. I got like 2 little tiny vegetables. So I love that you're saying, what are you good at and how can you share it? And you don't have to feel like it's got to be Pinterest worthy. I love that you're saying, just do that little bit. That's little is going to be a buzzword for me today of what you're sharing. Be a little bit brave, take a little step, just do a little bit. I know one gal that is a friend, that she started off with writing her Christmas newsletters, amazing Christmas newsletter. Like, I waited every year for this newsletter. It was so
Right.
funny and so good. And she's ended up writing a book because she started that little bit, in that safe
Yeah.
space, in that safe way. So let's take that and let's talk about, as you kind of alluded to with reaching out to your neighbor. I see one thing that I hear from women a lot is, I feel so lonely. I feel so disconnected, and especially now. And I love
Yeah.
that you reached out to a neighbor, to get that
Mm-hmm.
information instead of just Google. What are some other tips or thoughts that you have about ways that we can appropriately connect with each other, especially now?
Yeah. Right now does offer a new challenge. And everyone's comfortable with something different right now. You know, I would say anytime that you can make a connection, to take advantage of that. I know that a lot of people are using COVID as a reason not to connect, and really think to yourself, like, do I really need to stay home? Or is that an excuse for me? And, there's honest answers on both ends. But figuring out how you can still have some connections during this time. You can make a phone call. You can text someone if you said, hey, I remember that I love your bread recipe. I can't figure out how to make mine rise the way that yours does. Do you mind jumping on a phone call with me? Or could I watch you do it next time you bake bread? Another thing that I think is really important is to just, and I talked about this quite a bit in the book, but is to be honest. I think a lot of times we think that people won't like us if we don't have it all together. And in all honesty, people like us so much more when they know we don't have it all together. I can't remember the last time I asked someone why they were friends with someone and they said, oh, because she's perfect. She never has a bad day and her house is always clean and she always has impeccable fashion and her kids never make mistakes. That's why I chose to be her friend. And, you're laughing about it, but I think so many of us put pressure on ourselves that's who, if people are going to like us, we better be all those things. And it's just absolutely the opposite. Most people find real, strong, lasting friendships with the people who are okay to be honest, who are okay to say, I've had a rough day, or, this kid is struggling right now and I'm not sure what to do, or we're going through a hard financial time. We got to redo our budget. Like, any suggestions? I know that happened for you one time. And so just being honest and open, no one is going to look at you and think, oh, you're kidding. Her kid doesn't always do what she asks. Like, what a horrible person. That's never going to happen. What's going to happen is people are going to open up and you're going to create friendships and relationships of trust. And you're going to be the type of person that someone is going to call when they're having a hard time or when things don't go exactly right for them, because they know that you're honest and open and comfortable with people who are also imperfect.
Absolutely. Is there an experience for you personally that comes to mind when you were like just maybe at your wit's end or having a tough time and you were able to reach out to someone or someone reached out to you that just made that connection with each other, that you felt like, wow, we really connected on that level?
Well, there was a time when I was struggling with one of my kids and it felt really intense, and I wasn't sure that I wanted to tell anyone about it. That was an uncomfortable thing to talk about for me. And I was just at my wit's end. And a woman in my neighborhood who, she's on her last child, and from my point of view, must have 4 perfect children. They all, graduated from top universities and they're all happily married. And the child she has left is super awesome and just killing it in life. And I just was like, oh, I don't know that I want to tell her, that I'm not doing so well with my own kids. But it was just at a point where I just didn't have an option. I just had to say something. And so I opened up to her and just kind of said how my son was struggling and how I was struggling. And I just felt like a horrible parent and I couldn't figure it out. And she was like, oh yeah, I went through the same thing with my oldest son. And this is her child who's not here anymore. And she's like, yeah, it was really hard. And I felt like I made a lot of mistakes. I'm like, wait, hold on. He's awesome now. And he's like killing it and has a great job and his darling wife. And I thought you had 4 perfect kids. And it was just such a relief to me to know, oh, okay. So, these young teenage years don't last forever. Kids grow up, they make different choices. And even that someone who I really looked up to and just thought had it all together had also been in my position before. So
Love that. And that bond that you make with each other. And I think what's beautiful is when women realize that doesn't mean now you have to be best friends, right? You can enjoy that moment and that connection. And now when you see each other or be with each other, there's that immediate bond that you're there for one another. And if she need to pick up the phone or whatever, I love it. There's a gal in my neighborhood, same experience. I'm down in my closet under, almost underneath my clothes, like trying to talk at 11 o'clock at night. And I don't know what to do. Right. But when I see this woman, my heart is just with her. And occasionally we'll text about something and we don't have to go to lunch every day. There's just this friendship that's just like
Yeah.
solidified. And
Yeah.
and it's already grounded and dug and there. I love that.
And you know
So
what
love it.
was so cool too is because she's just an awesome person, she continued to care and she looked out for my kid that was kind of struggling, and she wanted what was best for him, and she was hoping for good things. And it was just so nice. I think when you have the right people in your life, that's the outcome of opening up, not whispered rumors or, everyone's talking about how this is a fail. So, you do have to be a little bit careful. Who you're willing to open up to, but you pick the right people and it literally is life changing.
Absolutely. And I love that. And there's texts of I'm praying for you and how
Mm-hmm.
did that go? And you feel seen and heard. And I love that you bring up the point that we as women yearn for that, but it takes that vulnerable step. And I love
Yeah.
that you bring up that appropriately vulnerable step. I know you mentioned in the book when you were feeling it, you were sitting, I think it was Relief Society, and you were feeling that this woman had shared a really personal story and you felt like you should give her a hug or something, but you reached over and patted her knee. And then you
Oh
were kind
my
of like,
word.
the spirit's like, pat her knee. And so you reach around. But my favorite part of that, and this is the point that I want to make, if you have suggestions for how to be appropriately vulnerable and how to take that step, is that you put your arms around her and said, I'm so awkward at this. I just felt like I wanted to give you a hug. And to me, that, like you're saying, being honest like that, it's almost like we go back to playground age and we're like, hey, will you be my friend? Right. And now that we're 30s, 40s, 50s, it's hard to walk up to someone and say, hey, will you be my friend? And they're backing away slowly. Right. But so it's the vulnerability. It's what you're
Yeah.
saying. It's the willingness to appropriately risk a small personal opening and then responding when somebody else does that. Any other tips for that looks like on the daily? Because people are still running and going. They're still taking kids to sports, or they're going
Yeah.
and dropping off at dinner or whatever. Any tips for in the daily opening up to that connection?
Sometimes I feel like women get down when it doesn't work out, when the friendship isn't reciprocated, or when, you feel like you're doing all this work and someone only kind of likes you. And one of the things as I've gotten older, that I've realized is everyone is just in such a different spot. And so we cannot take those types of things personally. We have no idea what's going on in someone's home or why they don't have the emotional bandwidth or the energy to reciprocate friendship. And so one of the things that I've tried to do is, if I want that relationship, or if I want to do something fun, or if I want to gather people, I choose to do it because I want to, not with the hope of reciprocation, not with the hope of a new best friend. Because relationships take work and they take time. And especially during COVID, they're going to take 10 times as long, maybe, for us to get where we hoped we would get in 3 months. And so just giving other people some grace and a little space. And then same thing, don't get down on yourself or think people don't like you or what am I doing wrong. You go out, you go be your authentic self. You be your best self, you're kind, you're inviting, your open self, and then allow people to respond in a way that works for them without you worrying about, did I do it right? Back to playground, like, I don't think she likes me. Assume people like you. Assume people would like to come. Assume people would like to be your friend, but that circumstances don't always allow for it.
Love that. Assume the best and start
Mm-hmm.
there. I love that. I remember Patricia Holland said in a talk years ago that there was a woman she worked with and she really wanted to have a relationship with her, really positive one, but it was just not going to happen. And she kept trying and trying. And then she said, I learned I needed to repot the relationship. And I've always remembered that. Isn't that beautiful? Just
Yeah.
repot. And what you're saying is that expectation, don't come in with it with trying to get an outcome, but opening yourself up to appropriate connection and then see where that goes. And I love that. That's
Yeah.
less pressure. That's, well, the cookies don't have to be
So
just
much.
so, right?
Yeah. Well, and even, I think about, we moved into this neighborhood about 7 years ago. And I'd always lived outside of Utah, where friendships came quickly and easily because everyone was so excited for you to be there. And relationships didn't come quickly and easily here because a lot of people had family and friends and high school friends. And I thought maybe one person was going to be my BFF. Well, it turns out she has like 7 BFFs. She wasn't in need of another best friend. And so instead we had a wonderful casual friendship that was awesome. And, I was able to look for deeper, closer friendships with other people, and that was totally fine. Another experience I remember having is there was this gal, and we had such a great time when we would get together and see each other at the park, and we just talk and talk and talk, and wonderful relationship, and our kids would play. And then she kind of stopped reciprocating. And I found out that her husband has bipolar disorder and he was in a dip. So it had nothing to do with me or not liking me or not wanting friendship. It had everything to do with first priorities in her home that she needed to take care of. And that taught me a really good lesson is that it's usually not about you. It's usually about something a lot bigger, and you just continue to be a friend, and you do what you can do and create relationships that matter in your life.
Oh, I love that. I really appreciate if someone has a question or something. I love when they ask me. If they say,
Mm-hmm.
"Hey, I noticed you haven't been around as much. Is everything okay?" And it can open that door for me to say something, or just say, "No, it's just been busy," if it's not something, that
Yeah.
needs to even be discussed or whatever. But I love when there are genuine, loving questions. It makes me feel like, oh, I matter to this person. So I know sometimes when I'm talking to
So
women, they're like,
good.
I don't want to say anything. I don't want to make them, I don't want to offend them, and I don't want to make them feel bad. But I think generally speaking, women like good questions. They like to know a genuine question and not have you wonder right in the background.
I
But
really love that.
that
That's so
was so,
important.
that was so helpful that you were able to find that out. And then you weren't like at night, that's would be us women eating, open the carton
Yeah.
of ice cream and go, what did I do? I shouldn't have been so loud in my laughter, like whatever it might
Right?
be. So last gear, this is so good and juicy. And literally, I wish we were in our pajamas and we could just chat for longer. But talk to me. I loved one of the things that you said in your book, which was you learned the value of picking your battles and preserving relationships, specifically with teenagers. And I loved that line, picking your battles, preserving your relationships. So can you share an experience of what that has meant to you? Because I think there's a lot of women that I'm talking to and that are out there right now that are like, kids are kind of doing everything, anything, whatever. And it's like all the rule books are out and they're supposed to follow this path and they're kind of doing whatever. And parents and moms especially are kind of like, where did I go wrong? But they're good people and we can get lost in that, expectations, as you were saying earlier. So do you have any experiences that would help someone that's listening to be able to say, wow, picking those battles, preserving those relationships, what would that look like for me to be healthy?
Um, well, as a mom without teenagers, I had a lot of expectations of what having teenagers would be and what my teenagers would be like. And um, a lot of those are gone because of exactly what you said, picking your battles and preserving relationships. And so you have to decide what really is important to you as a parent. Um, and then also taking into account what really is important to your child as a person, not as your child, but just as a person. And so as you get to know your children and you realize that one really, really values freedom, maybe 1,000 rules are going to push them away. And even if that's how you would prefer to run your home, because wouldn't we all, right? Wouldn't we all like to list our 20 rules of our home? And all of our kids are like, sounds great. Like, I will keep all 20 rules that you think are important. But they're just people too. And the things that are important to us are not sometimes important to them. Or sometimes they don't see the importance of those things until they're a little older or more mature or have some experience. And so a lot of, I would say a good portion of the things that I thought would be very important are no longer important. But the thing that has always been important is my relationship with my kids and my husband's relationship with my kids. And so, maybe for instance, you are serious about bedtime and it's this really big deal and you think everyone should be in bed, and you have a kid who's a night owl and he just cannot do it. Sometimes those rules may have to be flexible where, okay, maybe, like at our house, the Wi-Fi goes off at a certain time, but I'm not going to stand next to somebody's bedroom and turn the light off and make sure they, are in bed. So you can kind of make concessions for things so that there is some freedom felt. For other kids, maybe it's control of their schedule is really important. And so maybe you've always wanted them to continue in a sport that you've paid for and loved with them since they were 7. And they decide at 15, they don't really like it and they want to do something new. And so instead of like holding on so tight, talk to them about it, make sure they understand that's their choice and that the consequences are also theirs for the future. If they decide they want to go back and maybe there's not room on a team, making sure that they understand. I think it's really important as a parent to give our kids as much information as possible, but then to also allow them to make some of those choices, even the ones that do have some hard consequences, and then not to talk about it every 3 days about like how you're so sad they don't play soccer anymore, or something like that. Allow them to own the choice and own their life and continue to move on and show them some of that trust and their ability to make good decisions because they have been taught for a long time. And then also to point out when maybe it wasn't such a great decision, and that's okay too, right? That's part of growing up. That's part of being a teenager, is sometimes you make bad choices and you have sometimes minimal consequences, sometimes really hard consequences. And just to be the parent, I like to say, to be the parent that they know will always support them, but won't always figure it out for them. So they always have me on their side. They always have me to walk with them, even through really horrible and difficult things. But I can't and won't figure it all out for them.
I love that. I think you hit on such a key word, trust. I feel like this generation, more than any other, it seems to me, just really wants that trust and the freedom to use their agency. I mean, we're all about agency as parents until our kids try to use it. And then we're like, well, why are you doing that? And I think that's such a key piece is keep trusting and loving them and keep letting them know, I trust you. I have children that I've said, I trust you. And they're walking out the door and I'm like, I don't trust you. I don't trust you. But I'm asking, help out my unbelief. Like I'm asking Heavenly Father, help me to let them know they're trusted. And I remember one time, one of my daughters told me, it was such a mama paycheck moment where she just said, we talked about different things that, were possible things kids could be doing because kids were doing them and blah, blah, blah. And she said, Mom, I don't do those things because I know you trust me. So I don't do them. And I went, wow. And this is one of the ones that I probably would have been a little bit more concerned about. And that taught me so much of just biting my tongue, bite the inside of my cheek, like bite my knuckles if I have to, but just that trust piece. I think you hit on something so vital there, that the more that we can instill that trust and point out the strengths and the good things that they have, they're bright, they're smart, they're good people. And I think you're right. If we can support that, encourage that, and then step back and go, well, what do you think? Yeah, where will it lead if you make those decisions? Where will that lead? Without that energy behind it of, yeah, but I still want you to choose my choice because it's the best one. I love
and
it.
sometimes they are going to make the bad choice. And sometimes the trust shouldn't be given, right? And that's okay to have those conversations when it's, you know what, I do want you to be able to go here, but last time you told me you were going here, you actually went somewhere else. So I can't trust you. And I'm going to have to turn on the location accuracy on your phone because I need to know that you are where you say you're going to be. Now, when that goes back to being trustworthy, then I'm not going to have to track everywhere you go, or I am going to say sounds good. And I don't have to call the parent to make sure they're going to be there. Helping them understand that trust is built and earned, but that they start with it. I start trusting you, and then it's something that's maybe taken away, and it's okay. It's okay to be the parent in those difficult situations and hope that you don't have to be very often, and that maybe they'll learn their lesson with 1 or 2 of those
experiences.
mistakes. Yeah.
Well, and I love the point that you make that, we trust them. I know a friend of mine always says trust, but verify. So I love that because I trust you. And there's sometimes I need to verify. And I love that we can say, I still trust you. I want you to earn back trust in this area because your choice last time led me to have some doubt now. So I need you to earn that and show me a little bit more of show that you are trustworthy. So what are you going to do about that? What are you going to do to engender that trust? What can you do this next time that can make sure that I know that what you're saying, that your word is gold, and those kinds of things. You're exactly right. Being positive and letting them know, I really do see you that way. So show me that behavior because that's really who you are.
Yeah.
Love. I know we could talk forever and a day.
We
I'm
could.
just
It
loving
would be
this.
so fun.
Oh, you are a love. And I'm going to recap for those that are just joining us or who want to kind of hit the high notes. I'm just going to hit some of the key points that she said that were so good. All of this juicy stuff. Be a little brave. Little is our key buzzword today. Be a little, just a little bit more open, a little more whatever. Be a little brave. Be aware of the talents that you have. Write down 4 and then how you can share them or find someone who can teach you something that you want to learn how to be talented in. I love be open to appropriate connection. Be honest, be authentic about it and who you are. Be patient with the friendship process. And that is so important for us as women, being just letting it ride, letting it develop, let it unfold. Assume the best from others that they do want to connect with you. And we don't have to go into our, do these jeans make me look fat kind of a thing. And we can say, pick your battles and preserve the relationship. So remember, when working with our family members, our loved ones, our colleagues, pick your battles, preserve the relationship. Brooke, if people want more, which they are going to, where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Brooke Romney Writes. I have a website, brookeromney.com, with all my past articles and podcast links. And then also my book is on Amazon and Audible for those who are interested.
Perfect. And that book is called I Like Me Anyway. Highly recommend. And you can also find her at Time Out for Women as well. Brooke, such a joy with you today. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Connie.
You're a love. And as always, if you love these podcasts, go rate and review. We would love it. And then for all freebies, goodies, all kinds of wonderful things, TV segments, blog posts, go to conniesokol.com. We've got lots of great stuff to help you live your purposeful, organized, and joyful life. Thanks for watching. As always, hit that like button, click on that bell to get some future videos right into your inbox. And if you want all the other goodies like podcasts, best-selling books, results-getting programs, and all that jazz, then go to conniesokol.com. I got lots of goodies there for you. And if you want to connect on social media, I'm on all platforms, so join me there because I want to connect with you right now and help you step into your purpose-filled life.